As PC gaming was opening up these brand new kinds of experiences to me, I had my very first encounter with what would go on to be one of my absolute favourite genres, and one that, like the interactive movie, has all but died out: the point-and-click adventure game. I know, boring. Yes, a video game that had no test of reactions or skill or timing, just whether or not you could puzzle out the solutions to obscure problems using an inventory of seemingly unrelated objects, together with a limited selection of verb commands like use, look, open, pick up, etc. This was a brand new thing, and it appealed to me as a kid who was pretty good at school but also tended to take my time over things. I didn't like being rushed, and it took me a little longer to do things because of a little touch of OCD probably. We called it perfectionism back then, but it was the same thing. So it's like they made a genre of game specifically for me. I could take my time, I could think about it, I could experiment with different ideas without worrying about dying. Because you see, my preferred purveyors of point and click were LucasArts. There were essentially two schools of adventure game in the mid-90s, LucasArts games and Sierra games, and they represented different philosophies. LucasArts games were the relaxed ones that gave you essentially infinite time to figure things out, and there was no way to lock yourself into a no-win scenario or a game over. Sierra, on the other hand, took more inspiration from traditional video games, and made it not just possible for your character to die, it was often quite difficult to avoid. This is why I never really went in for stuff like Space Quest, despite loving Star Trek. Ultimately, it was the LucasArts games that came to define the era, with really famous releases like the Monkey Island games, Sam and Max Hit the Road, and this, probably my favourite adventure game of all time, Day of the Tentacle.
It's from my old friend, Green Tentacle. He says that Purple Tentacle's mutated into an insane genius, and Dr. Fred's going to kill them both. I thought I was free of Dr. Fred and those crazy Edisons forever. But now, I know that I must go back to the mansion.
This is a sequel to a game called Maniac Mansion from 1987, which many people cite as the very first point-and-click because they took the old text-based command line adventure games and translated it into a visual, mouse-based interface instead of having to type. This made it feel more interactive and streamlined the experience, and as graphical power continued to accelerate, the adventures could look more and more impressive. Day of the Tentacle is a fantastic showcase of the cartoon art style that defined not just LucasArts games of the time, but also a lot of kids' TV, particularly from Nickelodeon. Rocko's Modern Life debuted, in the UK at least, this year, and slotting it alongside shows like Ren and Stimpy and Rugrats, it's clearly no coincidence that the art style is similarly full of these Burton-esque surrealist perspective in the environments and exaggerated features on the characters. This was the style at the time, as they say, and it did create an otherworldliness that was and continues to be very appealing in terms of escapism.
Hey, wanna see a neat trick?
Sure.
Neat, huh?
My Pony Express stamps. You ruined my Pony Express stamps, not to mention 5 years of therapy.
Of course, these games live or die on whether the story is funny/compelling enough, and whether the puzzles are on the right side of either interesting and challenging, or stupid and frustrating. And in my view, this game manages to be both satisfying and funny enough to make it a compelling adventure.
I've never gotten over my childhood fear of Uzo.
While maybe not being as funny as Sam and Max, the puzzles make more sense and you'll spend less time getting frustrated at a lack of progress than either that game or the Monkey Island adventures. The main hook of this game is that the three protagonists have been stuck in different time periods, past, present and future, exploring the same house in those areas and trying to get everyone back to the present. That means scouring comedy iterations of history, interacting with George Washington and Benjamin Franklin.
Whoa, you're like George Washington. Very much like him, according to my wife, Mrs. Washington.
As well as a dystopian future ruled by the Tentacles.
I have to go to the bathroom.
Ha, that's a good one. Imagine a human using a bathroom. Come on, let's take a walk. Okay, human, do your business.
To gather up all the required objects, some of which may be needed to solve puzzles in a different era. If that's the case, you can flush these items through time to your companions and figure out what needs to be used where and when. There are even some fun time travel mechanics such as cutting down a tree in the past so you don't get stuck in it in the future, and putting some wine in a time capsule so it can turn into vinegar in the future. This is all wrapped up in a relaxed and jovial tone that makes enough fun of itself to be endearing without veering into try-hard, and the adventure wraps up before it outstays its welcome, making it, in my opinion, one of the best adventure games ever made.
Mr. President, may I offer you an excellent smoke? Can you also provide me with a light? Sure. Well, in that case... Blast, I hate it when that happens.
It really speaks to the quality of it that I have played this game through to completion more than a dozen times since my first go in 1993, and I love it each and every time. Like many of the most iconic games of the time, there's a new shiny HD re-release available on modern machines, and there's nothing wrong with that, I suppose, but in the spirit of what I mentioned earlier about imagination and allowing a game to seep into your mind and become an escapist fantasy like a book, I would recommend playing it in its original, more pixelated form. The clearer and more polished games like this look, the less magic they have for me. But however you experience it, if you haven't played this one, you really should.